Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 31 of What If Naruto was in the Bleach universe. If you guys enjoy this What If, and want to see part 32 of it, comment down below, and let me know. Also check out previous parts of this What If. I have created a playlist for this What If, where you can find all the previous parts, link is in the description. And go ahead, and check out other What Ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content, it really means a lot. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. A fight against a lieutenant in an army full of death gods, and her sensei, who was the most powerful pure human being on the planet, was completely green-lighting the whole thing. Okay, sure. Why not? Sometimes Suzuki had to wonder just what her life would be like had she not tried to beat up the weird new blonde kid in class after he said scared her. What if she hadn't been so suspicious of him and hadn't met with him on the roof of his weird new converted warehouse? Well, there was nothing she could do about it now. The moment she sprang to Naruto's defense when Momo attacked him, she lost the chance to be a bystander in this fight. She didn't even want to go to Hueco Mundo as that place seemed creepy. Instead of going on this little learning excursion with Naruto, she'd have probably chosen to trade Momo for her place, if she had the option, and if the petite Shinigami had not rubbed her the wrong way in trying to stab her teacher from behind. I won't let you stand in my way, Momo said quietly, her hands shaking at the thought of being so close to seeing her beloved eyes, and again, I'll go right through you if I have to. She shouted as she ran forward, Zanpakuto in hand to attack Tatsuki. Uh-oh, time to focus up. Tatsuki thought to herself as she held her trench knives at the ready. Momo's sword struck against the jagged teeth of her weapons and threw up sparks as she pressed against the human girl. Wait, I can stand up to this. Everyone she fought to train had overwhelmed her from the start. In the beginning, Naruto kicked her all over creation, and still did as a matter of fact. Ichigo pushed her all over the practice field, likewise for Chad, except that he hurled her all over the field. And Hidan never struck just once against her guard. He always utilized an all-out assault. And after dealing with that, was she really capable of keeping up with the lieutenant? Only one way to find out. Tatsuki shifted her guard into crossing up the teeth of her trench knives, trapping Momo's sword within, and allowing her to push it to the side to kick her in the face. She froze in place as a stunned Momo stumbled back. I hit her again. She hit me. Again. There you go, Tatsuki-chan. Naruto thought to himself as he continued to sit on a nearby house and observe. You're used to dealing with people far stronger than Momo here. Not only physically, but overall. When you're forced to work to keep up with monsters, you either adapt and improve or you find yourself destroyed. Let's put that absurd growth rate of yours to the test, and see what you've got. No, Momo said, touching at her torso where Tatsuki had managed to strike her for the second time. This can't be possible. Her voice was somewhat rattled as she continued. There's no way I can let myself lose when Aizen Taicho is being controlled by that awful Ichimaru Tausen. I won't. She was about to come back again in force, and Naruto's face hardened into that of a harsh taskmaster as he barked out his instruction. Tatsuki, this isn't some point sparring tournament. When you break her attack, don't let up, or you'll give her a chance to get your moves down. See the opening and finish her. Easier said than done as far as Tatsuki was concerned, especially when Momo used flash steps to move next. Survival instinct kicked in, and Tatsuki turned to the correct side in time to defend herself. Still, Momo got her off guard and managed to come close enough past her trench knives to cut her bicep. Blood flowed from the cut through the rip in her shirt as she continued to defend against Momo's sword strikes. I need to be faster. This isn't cutting it, Tatsuki thought to herself, wincing at the stinging wound, while Momo continued to blitz her. They clashed blades again, and this time Tatsuki spun through her own block to deposit a back elbow into her Shinigami adversary's belly. Phoenix wing. Like a quick rock and roll pyro display, fire discharged from the point of contact and engulfed Momo in a flash of flames that went out as quickly as they appeared. The burns hurt immensely, and temporarily blocked her vision. When fire didn't fill her view, the soul of Tatsuki's shoot did as she wound up being kicked hard in the face. This time Momo flew through the air, and landed on her back on the ground. Her eyes were shut with pain, and when she opened them, she found Tatsuki falling from the air at her with her fist cocked to strike. She gasped and quickly built up her energy. Snap, Tobiyume. Momo's Zanpakuto straightened out, and grew prongs like a jut on the sides of the blade. A fireball formed down by the handle, and with a reckless swing she let it fly up at Tatsuki, who had no way of moving out of the way. The fireball hit and exploded before Tatsuki could land in a grand display that lit up the growing darkness of the Soul Society's early night. Anyone that didn't feel like coming outside before definitely weren't going to venture outdoors now. From her place on the ground, Momo looked up with a horrified look at what she had just done. That was a human girl that she had started the conflict with, and she had just released her Zanpakuto in order to cause her harm. She had killed her. At least she thought she had. Chunks of barrel that hadn't been blown to debris in the blast fell to the ground, confusing Momo thoroughly until she could feel the Ryatsu of the girl she was seeking, holding a hand to her chest and breathing heavily. You. Tatsuki said, holding up an accusatory finger in Momo's direction. You cheater. I didn't know we could shoot fireballs at each other. No rules in the deathmatch, Tatsuki-chan. Naruto deadpanned, wishing that he could flick a pebble at her forehead right then. He would have had there not been a fight going on at the moment. Good Kawarimi though. Nice eye. But Tatsuki's survival being confirmed, Momo's guilt faded, and she got back up. Well, now that I know you can handle yourself, I don't have to treat you like just another human anymore. I can get serious now. Tatsuki was giving her a look as if to ask her if she shot fireballs from her sword at every ordinary human, not just the superpowered ones. I've told you before, I won't lose here. Tobiyume. Oh hell. Tatsuki said, quickly rolling through hand seals when she saw Momo wind up to swing her sword in her direction again. Luckily by now the needed seals for her jutsu of choice were second nature to her by now. Kaden. Dukaku no Jutsu, 5 release. Grand Fireball Jutsu. Both girls shot their respective fire attacks at the other, and when they met the entire street was engulfed in flames. It looked as if the whole neighborhood would go up in smoke until a clap was heard and a barrier of air formed, sucking the oxygen right out of the fire. Wind style, devil's vacuum. Eyes turned to Naruto, who still sat on the roof, his hands still outstretched from the large amount of space he had just drained of flames. Other than that, he merely remained seated with an objective look on his face, and gestured for them to continue. Not needing anyone's permission to keep fighting for her chance to go to Hueco Mundo, Momo again vanished in flash steps as it seemed to fluster Tatsuki into making mistakes the first time. Unprepared for it again, Tatsuki suffered a cut to her back, before she could even turn around. Lashing out in retaliation left her vulnerable, thus she ended up doing a 360 in anticipation of another crisscross move. The second time was different than she had been expecting, however, as instead of the anticipated sword attack that she received the last time, Tatsuki prepared herself for something that never came. Swordplay was not Momo's forte, and she did not relish getting into sword fights. She was a specialist in the art of Kido, and even in her clouded state of mind she still retained enough raw skills to string something dangerous together. Hado number 58. Tenrin. Momo had gained a little bit of space while attacking from Tatsuki's weak side this time, as she had her Zanpakuto levitating and spinning like a fan, prior to stopping it suddenly, blowing a tornado-like blast in Tatsuki's direction. Tatsuki dug her feet in and stuck to the solid earth beneath her with chakra, but still found her grip slipping and loosening, due to the push factor from Momo's wind attack. The dust and debris kicked up as well, and she had to squint to keep it from getting into her eyes. But even so, the flaming beacon at the origin end of the tornado didn't bode well for her. Oh no. Momo was going to shoot a fireball from her Zanpakuto straight through the center of the tornado, using it like a funnel to make sure that she couldn't miss her target. An indistinct kind of madness danced in her eyes, and the fire from her weapon only illuminated it. Naruto didn't like the look he saw from her. She was completely bewitched. What the hell did Aizen do to her? Naruto had seen women in desperate love that hadn't been as determined and unstable as Momo was. This was getting a bit too dangerous for his Tatsuki-chan. But he had to believe in his pupil. She could do it. She was smart. On the actual field of battle though, the female martial artist was completely beside herself. No, not like this. Not tonight. Not in her chance to show that she really was worth bestowing so many secrets and special techniques onto. She wasn't going to take all of the training that she had done to be useful to her friends like Orihime and Ichigo, and fail her first time away from the relative safety of Karakura Town. She didn't want Naruto-sensei to hold her hand through it. She didn't need Ichigo Chad and Ryu to back her up and save her when she got in over her head. She didn't require Yorichi, Gaara, or Hidan to look over her shoulder to make sure that she was alright. She didn't want Orihime to have to fret over her while healing her. She wanted to win. She never wanted to win at anything more in her entire life. This was more than just some national tournament. Finishing second here was just as good as finishing dead, and even if Naruto did plan on jumping in to protect her, if he had done so, she wouldn't have known what to do with herself from that moment forward. Yeah, that was all well and good, but she was still facing down a fireball. If she kept her chakra holding her to the ground, she was a sitting duck to take it head on. But if she let go of her chakra grip and tried to dodge, she'd just get blown away by the tornado and take a direct hit from Momo's fireball. Well, there was always option 3. The one that didn't involve her being hit by a fireball at all. She just had to come up with the specifics of said plan first. Tatsuki's grip tightened on the trench knife in her right hand as she started building chakra to it. It was time to take a chance and see just what she could do with all of the lessons taught to her. The weapon glowed blue with her chakra flow. Flying swallow. Now she needed a little something extra, and she added it by breathing onto the blade. Kaden. 5 release. And last but not least, a little bit of Rasengan training, add power. Her entire right hand blazed orange hot with the flames of her own creation, and she did the only thing that she could that would be able to counter her precarious situation. She punched the ground at an angle that fractured the dirt street in Momo's direction with an orange glow within it. The earth-shaking punch compromised her footing and sidetracked her attempt to hurl a fireball at Tatsuki. When she looked down at the glowing orange crack in the ground, it had opened enough to shoot a blazing hot burst of flames up high into the air, and right in Momo's face. Even Naruto had to let out an impressed whistle at Tatsuki. She came up with that on the spot. He knew damn well he hadn't taught her how to make her own jutsu yet. He didn't even know she was that far along in her elemental transformation and shape manipulation to do so. But there was always the possibility that she merely lucked out and pulled something special out of her ass. Whatever, I can't be a hypocrite about something like that. The fire that shot out of the ground, while the entire width of the crack that Tatsuki had created was controlled by the ground that surrounded it before it flew up, thus it wasn't dangerous to anything other than what was in the path of the crack and what was above it. It was as clean as could be, well for a jutsu that shot blazing flames 50 feet into the air. No hand seals either. This girl was scary. He had only been training her since the end of June. What in the world was making her improve so quickly? It was leaps and bounds. She went from fighting like a gifted rookie to a legitimate prospect on the rise right before his eyes. He was going to have to figure this out one way or another, because this just wasn't natural. It was a bit Ichigo-esque, even though Ichigo would still eat Tatsuki for breakfast and spit out the bones if they ever fought for real. This wasn't to be graded on the substitute Shinigami's curve though. He had to literally die to even use his powers. That kind of made up for being a teenage death god. Tatsuki stood there breathing heavily, face covered in soot and sweat. Note to self, that jutsu, don't ever do it without better stamina. That took far too much out of her to perform. No wonder Naruto still wouldn't teach her Kage Bunshin. Her desperation jutsus upped her reserves. Cole is all hell though. Yeah, he was baddest today. Air saw what Tatsuki was. Next generation ninja extraordinaire. And Momo really showed that she was indeed a Shinigami lieutenant as she was alive and still standing. A round yellow shield of Ryatsu stood in front of her with her hands out, but it only kept her body from taking the full damage. As the attack came from underneath, she still took the lion's share of the flames. At least they weren't flames from Yamamoto, or she wouldn't even be alive to tell the tale. It's not over, Momo said quietly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. Her Shinigami outfit was badly burned, and the visible skin underneath it didn't seem to be any better off. She needed medical attention. Well, if she wanted to keep fighting, Tatsuki would be willing enough to oblige her. But Naruto held her back from advancing with an iron grip on her shoulder. When did he get down from the roof? She looked back and up at him to argue, but stopped when she saw the look in his eyes. It wasn't the man that tried to put in humor with his lessons, or that played with her during spars to get her to try harder. This was the man that was well over 2,000 years of age, the part of him that was justifiably able to teach her and show a world of things she thought not existed. That had seen more than she could possibly comprehend. That's enough, Naruto said, his presence actually calming down Tatsuki's rapidly beating heart. Sparing her a small grin, Naruto leaned down and gave her a short peck on the forehead as a fond gesture. You did great. I knew you could pull it off. The red-faced Tatsuki just grumbled under her breath at Naruto's cavalier display. If anyone were around to see that, she'd have tried to lay him out just out of principle. It did make her feel admittedly more awesome though. Momo meanwhile, still wasn't taking no for an answer. What? It's not over yet. I can still fight. She didn't care what he said. She was going to Hueco Mundo, and she was going to convince Aizen to come home. No matter what it took, I won't let you ruin my last chance to save him. She lifted her hands and started an incantation when she saw Naruto hold an arm out towards her. His eyes changed for just a moment, and she went hurtling through the air right at him. She shut her eyes in anticipation of her life ending, but when she came to a sudden stop, she felt no more pain other than the injuries already inflicted upon her. She found herself held up by the collar in the grasp of her ticket to the realm of the hollows, her feet just angling off of the ground. Naruto shook his head at her with a saddened look in his eye. Look at what you're doing. Is this you? You picked a fight against me and my apprentice. You tried to kill her twice, and you're still trying to attack us. All just to go to Hueco Mundo, to see someone that threw you away. He's waiting. Momo struggled to say, tears filling her eyes. Why does she have to be so weak? She was a lieutenant, damn it. He needs someone to save him, someone to clear this soul up. Momo, Naruto said, a frown adorning his whisker-marked face. Things like this really made him feel his age. People that abandon the people that love them are worse than trash. But it doesn't apply when you were the one abandoned. He left you. He tried to turn this place on its head, to try and become a god, or whatever he left to go do. All I know is that he's gearing up to try and take every single soul in Karakura town for whatever he wants. He gave her a shake. Stop it. Stop defending him. Please, stop making excuses for him, before someone gets hurt. The way they did when he kept making excuses for his friend. A young man that he would swear to anyone that would listen that he could redeem. He promised that he would shoulder all of his friend's hate, that he would die with him to keep it from spreading and harming anyone else if needed. Only until past the point where it was too late did he realize that there wasn't anything he could do. It was too bad that the world had to pay for it, and everyone else around them had to die first, and they were still the last ones standing, in one way or another. Here though Momo wasn't him, and Aizen definitely wasn't Sasuke. There would be no technical draw here. No eternal stalemate between equals. Aizen Sosuke would wantonly butcher her and move along as if he had merely stepped on an ant. Could he get through to her though? Kami, he hopes so. The people you've still got here, what are you going to do about them? You're the lieutenant of a whole division, you can't just run off in the middle of the night like that. If you keep going like this, you'll end up getting a lot of people killed. Possibly everyone. Don't do what I did. There are others that count on you. But from the look in her eyes, his pleas only served to hurt her heart. With resigned sigh, Naruto just let her go, and Momo slinked to her knees on the ground. Inohana was going to tear him a new one, and Hitsugaya was probably going to try and kill him. When he eventually came back to report on what he found to Yamamoto, he was sure of it, but for now they had to go. They were late to arrive as it was, and with the mass party waiting in Hueco Mundo on their arrival, he was going to get chewed out collectively. With a motion from Naruto to follow him, both he and Tatsuki walked past Momo, who seemed to be a bit broken as Naruto latched onto Tatsuki, and they vanished in a whirlwind of leaves to gain some quick and clandestine distance in case she tried to attack them again. Momo didn't try to pursue. She didn't even look up or turn around in the slightest. She was actually considering using her Zanpakuto on Naruto to stab him at the close range that he presented to her. She had to stop herself from driving her sword through his belly. And he had done that on purpose. To see how deep her psychosis really was. While it still existed in spades, Aizen's bewitching of this girl had lessened in severity in his absence. She had a very rational mind, and a good head on her shoulders. It was just misty, whenever the topic of her former captain came up. Such a show of faith, that there was something rational within her, or confidence that even if she attacked him, he could protect himself and stop it. She wished to believe that it was the former. Karakura Town. Ichigo's house. Well, Ichigo was no stranger to receiving strange guests in his home. After all, he housed a recovery Shinigami within his closet, the tail end of the last school semester. But the way that this current houseguest had made their appearance was way more annoying than Rukia's day. Directly in front of him, on his floor, in his room, sat a little black cat that stared up at him with mischievous yellow eyes and a slowly waving tail. Now normally this wouldn't have been much of a problem, and he would have sent the felonious feline packing upon seeing it. But Yoruichi had a knack for keeping herself hidden, and he didn't notice she was there until he got into the house, and one of his sisters then pointed out the cat following him. It was like it came out of absolutely nowhere, but he knew better. And out of his two sisters, Yuzu loved Yoruichi's cat form, so even though he so sorely wished to, and he knew exactly what it was really, Ichigo couldn't just grab the beast by the scruff of its neck and hurl it down the block to get it away from bugging him. God damn it, Yuzu. Why does she have to like everything cute? So there Yoruichi was, merely taunting him with her unrestricted access to his home, just because his little sister was currently sitting in front of his bed cuddling the cat like there was no tomorrow. Yuzu. Ichigo said in an effort to try and distract her from the transformable supernatural cat. You've been playing with that cat all afternoon. Did you do your homework? That got the sweet brown-haired girl to freeze in her ministrations, and slowly put Yoruichi down. Well. Her voice came out in a mumble at first, but when Ichigo cupped a hand to his ear, wordlessly asking her to speak up, she couldn't lie to her big brother. No. But can I take the cat with me? I'll still do my homework. Ichigo ran a hand through his orange hair, but shook his head nonetheless. No, you won't. And besides, we can't keep the cat here. It doesn't belong to us. Someone could be missing it. There wasn't a look of humor on his face past his usual slight scowl, but he was so glad he was able to say the following things out loud, and Yoruichi couldn't do anything about it. It came from the street, so there could be all kinds of nasty bugs on it. Who knows what kind of diseases it could be carrying. The implication was not lost, and that was the point. Thank goodness Yuzu couldn't feel spiritual energy, because Yoruichi was leaking Ryatsu in anger of what Ichigo had the gall to say out loud. I don't think this little guy has anything like that. Oh, she would have been pinned to the floor from the sheer pressure of it. Trust me Yuzu, it could have been rooting around with God knows what, and you'd never know. Oh yes, he was enjoying this. Did that make him a bad person? Nah, you had to take the small victories anywhere you could get them. Keep it here, so I can get it out in a bit. Well, he was her older brother, and he was basically in charge whenever their dad was busy with the clinic, so she had to listen to him. With a pout on her face, she put the cat down to the side, and got up to go do her homework. Maybe if she finished quickly enough, Ichigo wouldn't have given the creature the boot, yet so she could play with it a bit more. To try and deter him from getting up to get rid of the cat before she was done, Yuzu shut Ichigo's door, thus leaving the substitute Shinigami and the former 2nd Division captain alone in his room. First and foremost, Yoruichi brandished her claws, before speaking in the strange male voice that came with her cat form. So, diseases and bugs you say? Ichigo crossed his arms and turned his gaze out his window defensively. Hey, Naruto's been running around the world for basically 2 millennia, and he's a guy. Who knows what kind of nasty old world syphilis he could have picked up. The source material for those damn books of his had to come from somewhere, right? Experience probably. Even if that were the case, and it definitely wasn't, a solar Shinigami couldn't suffer the physical ails of humans, at least from them. Soul Society had its own list of similar sicknesses and whatnot for those with spiritual power though. You just had to ask Ukitake about that. Just how promiscuous do you perceive the two of us to be? Yoruichi asked with quite a bit of actual curiosity. Between her personality and Naruto's, she could pretty much see where a prude like Ichigo would get that kind of idea. You act as if we run every 4 hours like rabbits or something. And you're saying that you don't? Ichigo asked, raising a disbelieving eyebrow her way. Yoruichi seemed a touch offended, and jumped onto Ichigo's bed to get a closer point, to glare at him from. Hardly. We do usually have work to do, namely involving trying to help you keep this town of yours safe from hollows, our car, and recently bounce. We're adults. About that, Ichigo said, trying to get a serious conversation going now that he had Yoruichi there in essence. Aizen's aiming to go after my town, so why am I not going to Wako Mundo with Naruto and Gar? They had even chosen to receive Kensei of the Vizards to go with them, and he wasn't even going to delve into the weirdness of what was up with Nell. It's my responsibility to protect Karakura town, isn't it? His point was admirable. There was a madman out there that wanted every soul within his city limits for some kind of spirit tool. It wasn't that narrow of a window for a threat though. Depending on what Aizen did with what he created, he could ruin the balance of the worlds altogether. Not just the Soul Society or the human world, Wako Mundo would more than likely suffer as well. I see what you're trying to say, Yoruichi said, fixing Ichigo with a thoughtful expression on her feline face. But it depends on how much you're willing to risk, if you truly desire to take your shot at taking him down. Are you willing to leave this town vulnerable to attack, in order to do so? Because that's why it was elected to take others. In all reality, you are more than powerful enough to survive there. Do you really want to go that badly? There was a but there in somewhere, Ichigo could just feel it. There always was. What if I did? Staring intently at the person that was arguably responsible for bestowing most of his more relied upon abilities as a Shinigami upon him, Ichigo endured Yoruichi's own look of purpose in return. Yoruichi, what if I did? Someone's got to put an end to this. And that someone was going to be him. All on his own. The kid had guts, she'd give him that. But this wasn't like storming the Certate to retrieve Rukia. If you really want to go, you should wait until we get word back from the party currently in Wako Mundo. Yoruichi pawed at the window for Ichigo to open it up for her. Nelliel has said that she is willing to guide us to Las Notches, but she will do nothing more. When they locate the fortress, they will probably return, or at least, send for more assistance. As things currently stood, with Nelliel exercising her right to refuse to pick sides, she was not an active combatant in this conflict. That left Naruto, Gar, and Kensei as the only viable combatants on the side of the recon party. Tsuki was there too, getting some on-the-job training so to speak, but realistically she would only be there to observe. In a real battle she would only be able to do so much, and if she were forced to face in a spot, Naruto would be down an apprentice within seconds, no question about it. What if I wanted to go now? That's not smart. Yoruichi had to insist and put her foot down in this instance. When we say that Wako Mundo is a desert, we mean it. There are no landmarks, no way to mark where you've gone, and where you're going. And most importantly, without someone that can split dimensions like Hidan, Gar, Naruto, or Nelliel, you won't be able to return home. From experiments and observations made on their Arrancar allies, Urahara was working on a way for a Shinigami to create a Garganta v Kido that he was probably going to end up selling to the Cerate, or just using himself. But it wasn't complete yet, and even if it had been, Ichigo had never even tried learning a single Kido, let alone one as complex and delicate as creating a portal to another dimension. His sheer level of raw power was just too much to establish any kind of base control over. He started off with far too much spiritual power to be given the beginner's course that most Shinigami were given. It was like giving full access of a cherry picker to a chimpanzee. It would help the monkey to do its job better than it could have ever imagined, but learning how to control it was a different problem entirely. Even so, it wasn't like that put going to Wako Mundo as a full-on impossibility. There were still ways. Lightbulb meet Ichigo. Wait, we can still do that. Ichigo said, all I need is an Arrancar guide, right? Yoruichi would have palmed her face had she not been a cat. Hidan is the only combat-ready Arrancar still here, and I really don't think you're going to be recruiting him to go into the desert part of Wako Mundo. He'll want to go into the forest of Menos so he can start killing them again. Nothing he wants is up on the surface. No, not him. What about Nell's brothers? Those two guys, what were their names? Ichigo tried to remember. He wasn't meaning to be rude, he was just seriously drawing a blank on the names of Nell's Fraction, Pen and Don Don. Pache and Dondachaka. Yoruichi corrected, I said combat ready Arrancar. What are those two going to do when you get yourself into a fight? They weren't helpless newborns, but comparing those two to Ichigo, even without using his hollow mask, even using only his Shikai, they'd probably still be overmatched. They aren't even a part of equilibrium. If Nell finds out you took them, she could be angry with you. I just need guides. I don't need the help to fight. Ichigo said, holding up his hands defensively. What are we going to do? Wait for someone to attack Karakura town again? No, he didn't like that at all. Aizen began all of this, and well over 100 years ago, if he was to believe everything told to him. He was sorry, but he couldn't be like Urahara or Shinji, or even the rest of the Vizards. If someone picked a fight with him, well, he couldn't help but do what he could to swing back. This would mark the third time that Aizen had taken a shot at them. The first time being during the events of everyone's attempt to rescue Rukia, the second time back during the original establishment of Mother Base, the third time being during the two-pronged attack on the base, and on the Rukongai district in the Soul Society. He was sick of being a soft target being held back by the limitations of the Serite. Listen, I butt heads with you guys a lot. Ichigo started to explain earnestly, usually with the Serite's captains. Not so much with you really, but with Jetabushi and especially Naruto. He had a bit of a problem with most forms of authority, always so patronizing to those with less experience to them. Even with all of that though, the thing that I like about you guys that lets me actually take pride in being with a lot of you is that, if we think we're doing the right thing, you let us do it. You let us make our own mistakes and deal with it, instead of just telling us what to do and trying to explain why you're right and we're wrong. In the Soul Society, right and wrong was established in a very narrow system of justice dictated by others that had no on-the-ground knowledge, understanding, or compassion for the reasoning behind anything. If you stepped out of line, you paid for it. It was so stuffy and rigid, it was a wonder that they got anything done, and it wasn't hard to see how Aizen had curtailed them for over a century with his plotting. I'm not even saying what I want to do is a good idea, Ichigo continued to say, but I think it's what I should do. I don't even need Nell's two brothers as escorts. Hell, I'll find Naruto, Gar, Nell, and Kensei if I have to before they leave and go with them. He just wasn't going to drop it, was he? He was going to keep hounding either her or Rahara about it until one of them gave in. She knew it would only be either of those two, because if he did it to Hidan, it would either end up in a fight where Hidan still wouldn't open a Garganta for him in the end, or Hidan would get tired of listening to him and open one, just to leave Ichigo behind and mock him. And both of those things would only serve to exacerbate the situation further. Fine. Yoruichi grumbled. A small smile actually crossed Ichigo's face, and he finally opened the window to his room for her, allowing the black feline to jump up onto the sill. But if you want even the slightest hope of catching up to them, you need to leave tonight. Tie up whatever loose ends you have here and get your ass to the base. She relented before jumping out onto the night street to return back home. Stupid kid. Would she say yes? Because he'd still probably find a way there, even if she didn't, and he'd get himself stuck there with absolutely no chance of getting home on his own. At least this way he might wind up getting an escort, or if not, he'd be able to somehow find the others and return with them when they were finished. That was fine. All Ichigo needed or wanted was a small chance. He wasn't going there to be a quiet observer, he was going there to make a splash and cut some chinks into the iron car armor, if not outright break it. He'd use Kon, tell his dad he was leaving, and that would be that. A short time later, Hueco Mundo, you did good, Naruto said as he walked through the never-ending sands of the desert world with Tatsuki alongside him wearing a cloak, to protect her from the weather. We need to name that new jutsu of yours too. Unless you want to call it Big Fiery Crack in the Ground. How about Vanishing Flame Crater? Tatsuki inquired enthusiastically despite her fatigue that she was trying to hide through exuberance. I was pretty great, right? Come on, tell me again how great I was. She preened, finally having done something truly praiseworthy in her own opinion. Well, it wasn't good to let his apprentice get a swelled head. Naruto didn't really get openly complimented whenever he managed to pull off a new jutsu around Jiraiya, until well after he had learned the Rasengan. The memories were hazy, but they were his fondest times, and formative years as a ninja. He wanted Tatsuki to know that what she had done was a big deal, but, remember though, she was a lieutenant, but she wasn't fighting with a full deck there. With a frown, Tatsuki had to concede that point. Had Momo been clear-headed enough to fight using her strength, which was clearly her devastating Kido ability from the start, to catch her in a trap the way she almost had to finish the battle, she probably would have won. Even so, she still handed a lieutenant her butt to her, and that was something to hang her hat on if nothing else, I know. But I had to take advantage of what was in front of me. Besides, if she had been well off enough to fight me at full capacity, you wouldn't have let me fight her, right? Crushing silence was the reply, as the only thing Tatsuki could hear in turn was the subtle wind blowing grains of sand about. No Naruto's voice, despite the fact that he was right next to her and had clearly heard her speak. Turning to her side, she saw Naruto distinctly trying to ignore her and narrowed her eyes at him. You wouldn't have let me fight her, right? I probably still would have, Naruto admitted, not really relishing in the glare he was receiving from the short-haired young lady. After hearing his answer, don't get all bent out of shape. This isn't one of those succeed or die kind of things like Urahara did with the Chico. If I thought that you couldn't take Momo as she was, I would have jumped in if she trapped you. Kind of like the way she seemed to at the end. Why didn't you jump in when she actually trapped me then? You busted out, didn't you? Sometimes you need to get thrown down a ravine to get the point of a lesson. Why do you keep using getting thrown down cliffs and ravines as a comparison? The two continued walking through the eternal wasteland for quite a while longer until from the sand a humanoid figure emerged. It was Gar in his own rich cream-colored cloak that was a part of his standard attire. His seafoam eyes scanned the two of them, and noted how somewhat beaten up Tatsuki looked before he locked eyes with Naruto. You're both late. Both of them held a look on their faces as if to ask him why he just rose up from the sand like that was normal or even cool. Neither of them said anything about it though. Calling Gar on for being odd wasn't really the best way to get any kind of answer from him. It wasn't as if anyone else had room to talk either, so they just dropped it. Took you long enough. The gruff and no-nonsense verbiage of Kensei made itself known as he walked up over a dune and sat down on the top in order to take off one of his shoes and pour sand out. Pick a worse place for someone to wait for you next time, why don't you? Where else would you possibly have wanted to meet? The whole dimension was nothing but desert. Why does the girl look all beaten up? Because she got beaten up. Naruto answered simply, looking over at Tatsuki, who simply gave him a who cares expression. Well, look at her trying to play it all cool. She's fine though. It's not like she'll have to do much else other than keep up anyway. Ever the attentive to detail, Tatsuki started looking around, but was unable to see the last person that was supposed to be there along with them. Where's Nell? I'm here. On the other side of Kensei's large hilly sand dune, the grown-up Nell sat on another rock looking at the seemingly permanent moon emblazoned in the sky. Apparently, Yoruichi had given her some clothes to wear after her transformation back from a child, which made sense given that adult Nellil seemed to be rather gifted physically. As everyone made their way toward her sitting place, Naruto decided to make sure this was okay with her. After all, this would probably be a touch more troublesome without her assistance. Are you sure you're alright with helping us like this? Yes. Nell consented without looking at him, still with the rather wistful and serious expression marking her countenance. If nothing else, I owe you this for taking such good care of me in my fragile state. I refuse to fight though. If you find yourself in battle, it will be on your own. I hope that you can respect this. It wasn't hard to feel the power from her, even though she was clearly trying to hide just how strong she was, but it was her choice, and with all of them there to do the fighting if it came to that point, there wasn't any reason to try and coax her away from doing as she wished. While everyone had been expecting something radically different from the fully healed Nell, what they got was still extremely surprising. Flashback, the previous day. Healing Nell's visual scar was the easy part for Orihime. The actual wound itself was rampant with foreign spiritual energy festering around it, which was the real problem. A spiritual wound to the massive fragments of an iron car. It was no wonder that such damage had been dealt to her energy if that were the case. From what looked like it would merely take minutes, the healing process dragged on to an hour, and then somewhat past that. Still, the healer of the group stood fast and continued working diligently until the moment that she felt her powers doing nothing more for her subject. Ah, I think that's it. Orihime said, blinking herself out of hyper-focus, and running the back of her hand across her forehead. I think I've done everything that I can. By this point Nell had fallen asleep on the floor as Orihime's barrier for her healing ability vanished. There was no longer a scar on her forehead, nor was her mask cracked. But other than that, she seemed the same as she had always been. In the time that they had all been waiting for Orihime's treatment to finish, Yoruichi had transformed back into her woman form, and had dressed herself once more. Naruto and Urahara had gone to have a video conference with Yamamoto to make sure that their next move didn't unintentionally step on the toes of the Serite. One of them had remained back to watch over what was happening with Orihime and Nell, and Yoruichi had chosen to be the one to do so when Tessai had to return to the shop to check on the recovering Yururu and Jinta. The two child shopkeepers as well as Donachaka and Pashe were still resting after being healed after being defeated by Haribel the night before. After the leak to Nell's energy had been repaired, Yoruichi didn't know what she had been expecting. She at least figured that it would be easier to sense the little iron car, but it seemed like nothing had changed underneath the surface throughout the entirety of the healing process, so after all of that anything she was going to say was cut off by powerful spiritual power bursting from Nell's body. The smaller laboratory that served as Urahara's obligatory base quarters seemed to falling apart due to its intensity. Orihime was afraid that what she had done had forced the little girl to explode of something at first, but that was just grossly inaccurate as to what was happening. I can't see what's going on. Yoruichi's eyes were able to better focus on the figure at the center of the power, and was able to make out the movement within. Her entire body is changing and growing. God, she hoped that they hadn't accidentally triggered a resurrection. Could they even do that? No, she was an Espada. The former Tress Espada. If she had gone into her resurrection, there wouldn't have been any question about it. Eventually everything subsided, and on the floor lay the new, or old, Nell. An adult. Quite the adult too from the looks of her. And her little bursts of power and sudden growth had destroyed the clothes that she had been wearing. Best to remedy that problem quickly before either Naruto or Kisuke managed to make it there from the calm room in case this new Nellil was modest about her body. And with that, Yoroichi walked over and carefully picked Nell up before quickly vacating the room, just before the remaining denizens of the building entered the room, with both Naruto and Urahara charging through the door, and Gaara appearing in a whirlwind of sand. Hidan just casually sauntered in behind everyone, calmly eating a sandwich. And all Rihime could do was laugh sheepishly. It seemed that she had certain events that she needed to explain. Where should I begin? Everyone just stared at her until Hidan polished off his sandwich and pointed at the floor behind Rihime. How about telling us why Half Pint's clothes are in scraps all over the room? He said, drawing attention to the fact that tatters of Nell's previous clothes that had been given to her to wear as a child were now indeed strewn everywhere. What, did you blow her up or something? I didn't think you had it in you. And flashback. That was a very strange evening, and one that Naruto couldn't really stick around to take part in due to his other responsibilities that night, such as managing to actually recruit a Vizard for this night's mission. Somehow Urahara had managed to obtain Nellil's services, and he didn't even want to know how. We're not even here to fight. Naruto said to Nell to try and get this show on the road. It's a scouting mission. We want to see exactly where the Espada are all holed up. Yes, because Aizen was well aware of exactly where everyone else was. Why shouldn't they be able to do the same against him? That would be Las Noches. The Grand Palace of the Hollows. Nell said, getting up from where she was sitting to vanish quickly to a slight distance away where she was looking off without facing them again. If you really want to find it that badly, then you should follow me. This will probably take a while. Everyone nodded and started following Nell, who was not using Sunito to move faster. With that in mind, they surmised that this place had to be rather far away, otherwise there wouldn't have been any reason to keep from doing so. It was soon evident that this was absolutely the reason why, as the minutes dragged on and turned to an hour, and an hour moved to 2 hours. The only reason they were all certain that they weren't going in circles was because of the fact that Gaara would have known as much, what with his strange connection with the desert and all. Thank goodness they were all otherworldly conditioned, and Naruto had given Satsuki a soldier pill when they had first gotten to Hueco Mundo just in case. As they followed the flowing green hair of the female Arin car in front of them for an increasingly long amount of time, the first to gripe was Kensei. I didn't know that there would be all of this running when I signed up for this, he said, shooting a poignant glare Naruto's way. Your fault. Boo-hoo, princess. Naruto responded in a salty manner. I almost had to beg you jerks to get just one of you to go. Besides, when was the last time you actually got a real workout? Seriously, they all hung out in a warehouse all day and night. When in the hell did they ever have to exert any real effort? They had to be even more out of shape than Naruto had been before they had whipped him back into it prior to storming the Sirte. Yesterday, Kensei insisted sharply. He took great pride in his physique. He worked out constantly, and knew for a fact that Naruto had seen him curling dumbbells for several hours straight. Lifting your wimpy baby weights doesn't count. Deadpanned Naruto. Seriously, this guy had been a captain. That meant something. Tatsuki wasn't even complaining. It's only been 2 hours since we started running. Someone doesn't do cardio. While Naruto and Kensei took turns rousing each other, Gaara turned his attention to the member of the group that was the same species as him. While he had no problems with someone being quiet, otherwise he would have been a massive hypocrite, there seemed to be something about her that was off. Despite being as subtle as was his nature to do so, Gaara was still caught looking in Nellil's direction. Yes, she said, deciding to address the situation if indeed there was one. Is there something bothering you, Gaara? Not so much bothering as compelling my interest. He admitted in his usually blank manner. Why did you agree to assist us? You seemed against such a thing until Hidan and I were asked to leave the room by Urahara-san. What did he do for you to change your stance? He asked me as a personal favor. Nell sat before a small smile found its way onto her face. He took care of my fraction and watched over me closer than any other, and the children of his shop got hurt trying to protect me. He is the real reason that I chose to do this for you. Aokisuke said immensely. With a nod to show that he understood, Gaara turned his eyes forward once more. When you've done this for us, what will you do then? You don't wish to have any part in the conflict between the Sirte and Aizen's Arin Karanu. The Gigai, in the vein of the one worn by you and Hidan. She said succinctly, this will mask the presence of my Ryatsu enough for me to live in peace with Dondachaka and Pashe in the human world. It's better than living in Hueco Mundo. Even without the army that has been formed here every single day would just be a constant battle for survival. What's it like being a hollow? Both Nell and Gaara turned their heads enough to see that Tatsuki had been the one to ask them the question. With the eyes of both Compastar and Car looking at her, she felt self-conscious. After all, everyone else there was bringing something absolutely incredible to the dance. She was really only there to observe and report. Just to learn. She didn't expect an answer, but she received one from Gar. You feel empty, constantly wishing to devour the most potent of souls. It can be of anything around you as long as their spirits are strong. Nothing you take is ever enough for you, you always desire more. You would have been a prime target for even the lowest level of hollows even before your training. That hunger drives many hollows to become nothing more than mindless beasts. They constantly fight with one another and eat what they manage to kill to take their power for themselves. Nell continued, picking up where Gar left off. She seemed to detest remembering those days. Only by obtaining strength does one ever gain the intelligence to prioritize this feeling against other more complex ones. It is a rather miserly existence. Wow, and humans thought life sucked for most of them. I tired of such a life and removed my mask from my face. Gar explained, I thought that it would kill me, but it turned me into an iron car. The feeling of emptiness faded quite substantially, but it didn't end my battles. So, I chose to sleep for at least an entire millennium it seems. That sounded downright terrible. No wonder every hollow she had ever come across seemed like the most pissed off creatures in the entire universe. Holy shit, isn't it? Hearing Kensei's voice as he seemingly stopped his back and forth with Naruto, everyone turned straight ahead to see a vast fortress standing above the white sands that it matched in color. Numerous massive towers surrounded it closely on the outsides. It was absolutely colossal. Everyone stopped in order to take in the sight of the stronghold. It was worth stopping and acknowledging. For sure, everyone had a thought on it. For Nell it was kind of like some kind of twisted homecoming. For Gar it seemed like a blight on the vast and beautiful desert around them. Kensei was only thinking about how far inside he would have to go in order to get a shot at obliterating Aizen. Tsuki wondered how anything like that was built. Naruto just wanted to know why everyone had to have a base the size of a capital city. How big is that place? Tsuki asked. She couldn't gauge just how far away they were from it or how big it really was. It looked as if it were on the horizon, but that was just too far away to be able to see something so clearly. Naruto-sensei, is this one of those ninjutsu things that you tried to tell me about? No. Naruto said, shading his eyes with his hand, so that he could try and figure the distance. That's real. And now that Naruto had a picture of what exactly the place looked like, he could utilize the Gato to get himself back to that general area. Should we get closer? It will take 2 days to reach from here, give or take. Nell stated, getting a stunned look from Tsuki, while no one else really seemed surprised about it. They were far away from the grand and imposing structure. I'll guide you as close as you need me to, but that's it. Looking around at Gar, Kensei, and Tsuki, Naruto tried to get a consensus as to what everyone wanted to do. The desire to continue on seemed unanimous amongst them. So decision was complete. Press on it was. Elsewhere in Hueco Mundo, a dimensional tear appeared in the sky, and from out of it dropped an orange-haired Shinigami with a massive bandaged sword on his back. Looking back up, he saw the figures that had brought him to Hueco Mundo via Garganta. The strange-looking Iron-Car pair of Donachaka and Pache. Take care of yourself in there, Shinigami kid. Pache shouted, waving down to him through the split in time and space. Remember, if you run past the gigantic white building that's the size of a small city-state, you've gone too far. Too far by like 3 days. Donachaka's larger frame pushed Pache out of the way, so that he could yell down to Ichigo as well. If you see Nilil-sama, make sure she stays safe and returns. She still wants to repay Urahara-san for all he's done, don't you know? Got it? Ichigo yelled back up to them. He didn't get the gist of the whole thing, but he understood enough to make sure. Alright, thanks for the help, you guys. Oh, one more thing. Incoming. Ichigo paled and quickly dodged, before he was smashed by the massive eelish body of Bawa. Having just seen his life flash before his eyes, Ichigo turned his eye up toward the open Garganta. Oi. What the hell was that? He pointed right at the smiling hollow animal for emphasis. Where the hell did he come from? He wasn't with us when we left. He was in my stomach, don't you know? Donachaka explained, just don't ask. He knows the way to Las Notches just fine, and he'll get there faster than you would on foot by yourself, so just ride him all the way there. Make sure he comes back with you too. Pache muscled his way back into view and waved down at Ichigo happily as the portal closed back up. Bye, Shinigami kid. Don't get eaten by something. Before he knew it, the sky had closed back up, and he was alone in the desert world with a gigantic wormeel whatever thing. Turning toward Bawa, Ichigo just shrugged and took his sword off of his back, before hopping up onto his back. Well, are you ready to go, big guy? Bawa made happy grunting noises, before he began to quickly slither his body across the sands like a train. Chad and Uryu were probably going to throw a fit once they realized that he went there by himself. Orihime probably would too, come to think of it. And everyone that was already there would probably pop him one when, or if he saw them. Well, no guts, no glory. As Naruto had previously said, the enemy was there, and Ichigo was going to attack them there. If Naruto, Gar, and L raised a ruckus, he could probably get in a good chance to do some damage himself. He already had valuable experience in going up against a massive force almost on his own, from when he fought in the Soul Society. How different from attacking the Cerate could attacking Las Noches be? At least here he would definitely still have the element of surprise. Las Noches. 5th Tower. Throne Room. In front of the man in charge, Aizen Sosuke, a hologram depicting the foreign party of 5 was projected, showing them looking unto Las Noches in the distance, before they started up their running again and went toward it. How bothersome. Aizen said, though his face didn't reflect his words. It was stuck in the usual satisfied smirk that he constantly had. It was as if nothing ever ruffled him. There was a reason for that as well. The element of surprise was completely non-existent in his realm. He had long since established complete control over the portion of Hueco Mundo, where his fortress was located. Even if something like this occurred, he would always be aware enough of it to react. It would take a day for them to get close to Las Noches. That was plenty of time for him to dredge up something to deal with them. And they had even been considerate enough to bring Nelliel back. That would save him the trouble of having to go and locate her later. He could have most definitely done without them bringing one of his first failures of holification in Muguruma Kensei, but what was done was done. It was just 5 of them. 4 since one could not realistically count the human girl with them as any kind of threat at all. As a matter of fact, she was a weakness. Uzumaki Naruto was indeed fond of his apprentice it seemed, but as impressive as she was to destroy Grand Fisher the way that she did without assistance, this was no place for her. She was the soft target of the lot. And what was this? Another hologram popped up showing Ichigo riding a gigantic worm hollow. So he was here too. Why didn't he come with the others, and why was he alone? It didn't matter. It was just another thing that needed to be handled before it became a problem. Kaname. Aizen called out, and almost immediately the blind, dark-skinned former Shinigami captain appeared right behind his ornate chair. We have an issue that requires a fine touch. Who do you wish to take with you to handle it? As if he could actually see, Towson's visor-covered eyes panned between Ichigo's lone hologram and the one that comprised the actual group. The decision was his, was it? Well, in that case he knew what he wanted to do. Allow me to test my new abilities out on Kurosaki Ichigo before turning my attention to the entire group. Towson requested. Ulquiorra and Haribel, as well as the Priver Espada, will be able to handle anything else. If they wouldn't be able to end things themselves, they would fight evenly until something could be done for them. This wasn't some outgoing mission to Karakura Town, or to the Soul Society. This was their territory, and they would show why one way or another. Aizen supposed that throwing sheer numbers of his weaker Car fighters at them would only result in losses though. Very well then. Have them prepare and send out the fodder hollows to deter them. There was absolutely no chance of any of the plain hollows to defeat any of them, but they would not be allowed a casual advancement to Las Noches, and by the time they arrived, they would be easier for his Espada to fight, and Yami. His arm has yet to fully recover as of now. Our healers are still working on him. I see. Well, when it does, I have an assignment for him. Zamari is to go with him. Just with Zamari, Aizen-sama. Yes, if not I'm afraid he might kill too many of our own during this mission. At least I know that Zamari is quick enough to avoid him just in case. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.